All right, kill it, guys.
All right, we did this. We've got the master animator, the Emmy Award winner here with sound. So thank you everybody for your patience. And I've been working on my intro for like a couple days here, so I'm going to do it. Is that all right with you?
Please do.
All right. So, about 2 years ago, before I launched Portfolio Rocket, what I did was I went around to the top design schools here in Chicago. And I wanted to find out from them, hey, tell me what's happening with your students and your alumni as far as landing jobs in the marketplace. What do they do when they graduate? I also wanted to get some intel to build my curriculum for executives. What I'm about to tell you is probably not going to shock you, but it's going to shock a lot of other people. What they told me was that for $250,000 for 4 years, close to 90% of them end up as baristas, making lattes. And one of the reasons why you're here today is because you have been doing something about that, and you are doing something about that. Chris Do, I am so thrilled to have you here. I'm thrilled because your mission is to help 1 billion people do what they love without losing their soul. And you introduced the Futur, which is an online private art school without the crippling debt. And what you've done is really made a dent in the world. And I appreciate that, speaking for other creatives. And so thank you for coming on Blast and a Half. Thank you for being here. And thank you for everyone that has been patient in figuring out our techs over here. So yay, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'll button it up right now and let you say something if you'd like to before we dive into these questions. And
yeah, absolutely.
Also, yes, for sure.
So first of all, thanks for having me. And thanks everyone for your patience while we deal with some technical difficulties. We are here. We'll make the most of the time that we have available together. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Yes. And so the reason why I also wanted to touch on that backstory is because you've legitimized and validated designers and designers as business, design as a business. And in the business of design, things cost something. And there's a price for them. And there's also a value attached. So since the topic today is stop confusing these three things, right? Let's not play the shell game. Help us, and would you please give us your definition or differences between those three things?
Are we talking about the difference between cost, price, and value?
You got it.
Okay. So I think the problem is a lot of us use the word price interchangeably with cost and also value. So let's understand cost. From an accounting point of view, when an accountant talks to you and says, what was your cost of goods sold? COGS. If this is not a term you've heard before, write this down. COGS, COGS, cost of goods sold. It means it's the sum total of everything that was used in terms of human power, materials, whatever it is that you needed to use to make something. So it could be a product or a service. So I used to make commercials for a living, like TV commercials. So I would add up all the labor and the equipment, the rentals, the software, and that would be my true cost. So when somebody approaches you and asks you, what is it cost for you to make me a logo? They're not literally saying, what is your cost to make it? Because if you were to charge that, you would at best break even. You would most likely lose money because there are times in which you're not working, when you're still paying for overhead, for electricity, insurance, and all those kinds of things. So now we have to talk about price. So price is what the amount of money that is paid to the seller of services or products. And there should be a difference between your cost of goods sold and the price. The two together is what the client pays. The amount of difference between those two, we could talk about. There's different theories about how to do that.
Excellent. So really important distinction. Could you talk about value? Because value is also that's the third leg of the tripod, right?
That's right. Excuse me. So value is what the buyer of the product or service receives. So the amount of value that they perceive and the price in which they pay are tied together. So you and I, for example, could make a logo for someone. It might
You make
cost us $1,000 to make a logo. Okay. So that's the cost to us, $1,000. Just want to write these down so I don't mix this up. Now, if we go and sell this to a variety of different people who need a logo, for example, a small shop owner, maybe it's a local, like a restaurant or baker, like a bakery. Okay. So the bakery says, I need a logo. So they have a certain amount of value that the logo is going to have on their business. I would say it's relatively low compared to, say, a giant consumer electronics company. Let's understand this a little bit. So this is where we start to understand value is contextual, it's relative. And so we have to think about it. Why does it not matter so much to the local baker? Why? Because people come to the local baker because of the quality of the bread. It could be the ambiance, the decor when they walk into the bakery, the smell of fresh baked bread. And if you've ever been in Paris, you know what I'm talking about. There's a
oh,
whole vibe. And then there's a reputation. There might be a relationship. This is a third generation bakery. So you know the grandfather, the son, the grandson, you know everybody that's involved in this bakery. Okay. And so if they change the logo, it's not going to make that much of a difference to you because you know exactly where the bakery is, and you know this is where you get the best fresh baked bread. We understand that. Now the same logo, say for a giant corporation, has completely different relevance and meaning. Well, first of all, they have to have a logo that they can trademark. That means they can register and protect it, that it's distinctive, it stands out against the competition. And if you think about how many impressions the giant consumer electronics company is going to have, meaning it's going to be on packages, it's going to be on the website, it's going to be on social media, it's going to be in 100 million places
everywhere, right?
everywhere. So the value to the buyer in these two scenarios is vastly different, even though the product is theoretically exactly the same.
Right. So I love the way that you said that. It needs to be contextualized and it's relative. The bakery, the CPG company, the big ass technology company, right? Like those people are, they're not, they're apples and bananas, right? They're both fruit, but they're apples and bananas. They're not the same. And so I really want to take this into something that is probably not only something that you deal with on a regular basis, cost, price, and value, but we all know like the gig economy, oh man, it grew 33% last year. I mean,
Wow.
we're talking 8 times faster than the US economy by itself. So here you are, you know, loud introvert with a big mission. I just love that. And what does this mean for people who are consultants, fractional CMOs, freelancers, all these people? How are they going to go out into the world as we used to know it and now know it and be able to make healthy livings to help you achieve this mission?
Mm. So, Lauren, about the gig economy, is it about a lot of people? Is this part of the great resignation where people are quitting their full time 9 to 5 jobs and going out on their own, working as independent business owners? Is this what's happening?
Yes, my head is nodding vertically. That's
Beautiful.
because 4 million people in fourth quarter of last year left their job. 1 million of those people said, I don't have another job and I don't really care.
Mm.
I'm just gonna leave and I'll figure it out. I mean, to be honest with you, that's what I did.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so,
Why did you leave?
oh gosh, I think we need to. This is about you. Come on, another time. But
Okay.
the point is here, right? So you're off on your own. You hang your shingle. What does this cost, value, and price mean for you if you're setting this up? What do you need to know, and what mistakes should you avoid?
Okay, this is beautiful then. You set this up perfectly for me. All right. So prior to you going out on your own and being an independent business owner, and I think we need to just get comfortable with that label. You're an independent business owner that just so happens to have an employee count of 1 for now, comma, for now, right? I want us to get away from this idea of calling ourselves a freelancer And I know you might be
No, do
saying,
it. Do it.
why splitting hair? Why split hairs like this? Because the term freelancer has a very specific application. And when you call yourself something, this is a label, and you start to become the thing that you refer to yourself as. And I think this is where it gets a little strange. Now, when I ran my company, Blind, we made commercials, and we relied on the help of a lot of freelancers. It's a large freelance talent pool. Freelancers are temporary employees, essentially. Okay, that means you come in, you get booked, you get paid by the hour or by the day or the week, whatever it is, but you're paid essentially for the time in which you work. It kind of
Right.
works like that. Now, here's the test if you're an independent contractor or if you're a freelancer. The test, Chris Do's official, unofficial test is this, is
Okay.
if you can be booked as a freelancer and your client knows that someone else is doing the job and not you, and they're okay with that, you're not a freelancer anymore because
Right.
they're essentially buying you and your time. Imagine coming it to a job, right? Some company books you, you're a storyboard artist, you come in and they're like, who's that? Who'd you bring with you? I'm like, oh, this is my assistant. Like, what are they doing here? Well, they're going to do the drawing. I'm just going to sit back and surf the internet if you don't mind. But I'm going to send you an invoice for $600 for today's work. They would throw you and your assistant out the door. That is
Right.
a freelancer. Freelancer typically has no benefits, no health insurance,
True that.
no sick leave, no nothing. You get paid for that time in which you work. Now, as a freelancer, you'll make more money than a full-time employee per the hour that you work. Why is that? Well, I just said because you don't have insurance, you don't have any kind of medical plans, you don't have 401k plan, and you
Totally.
don't have the promise of consistent work. So in the lulls between bookings, you're not going to make any money at all. Therefore, you have to charge more per hour than you used to make as a full-time job. So does
Okay.
everybody
So
understand
what's
that?
the problem with that? Because I've been to the offline dough school. So I've been to the offline dough school. And
The analog version.
the analog version. This, by the way, is my Bible. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much.
Dough. Woohoo. Yes. And in here we talk about these crazy thing called inputs, outputs. So what does that have to do with how you're thinking about cost, price, and value?
Right. Okay, when you're selling inputs, you're selling essentially your time. And so it's very basic logic here. So if
Right.
I were to go into a studio or work remotely, it doesn't matter. I'm not really incentivized to finish the job any quicker. In fact, if I sell the time in which I work on a project, you would think that the clients would start to get suspicious. Like, why does this take 2 weeks? Why doesn't it take 2 days? Well, because if I charge you for the hours in which I work, if I literally come up with a concept in 1 hour, I can't just make a living charging you for that hour. So this is what I tell myself so that I can do this ethically. Well, maybe the first idea is not a good idea. Maybe I'll explore more ideas. Maybe I need to do more research, do a competitive analysis. Maybe I need to let the idea gestate in my head a little bit. Maybe I need to refine this to the nth degree. And then I've now clocked in enough hours to legitimately say I've worked on this project for 2 weeks. The problem with charging for inputs is it punishes efficiency. It punishes experience. And we can get into debate.
This is banner worthy, right? Inputs punish say it again.
Yes, selling inputs or charging by the hour punishes efficiency.
Efficiency, thank you.
Yes, because if you are more efficient, you're going to take less time. If you're more experienced, you're going to come to the idea much quicker. And this, no one's going to argue with me, right? Someone who shows up on the job for the first time, whether it's laying bricks or putting up shingles on a home, whatever it is that you do, upholstery, the first day you show up in the job, you're not going to be that good. 10 years, 20 years in, you could probably do this blindfolded. You already know the problem before you even see it. You're like, this is not going to work. The house is crooked. We need to reupholster this whole thing and not just this one part because it's going to fall apart in 2 months. So you know these things. So the problem with this is that as I become better, I make less money. And so I have a choice. The two choices I have are I would just take longer to do the job, which is not ethical to the client or yourself. You're pretending to take longer. That's not a great thing. So that you do the other thing, which is what most people do. You start to raise your hourly rate. Now, many people don't understand this, will say, Chris, problem solved. Solution at hand. Just charge more per hour. Okay. It's still saying and incentivizing you to work more hours, even if your rate is really high. I have a very high hourly rate. Okay. And I do this for one-on-one coaching. That's the way that people tend to pay for coaching. But I'm not sitting here trying to say, well, why don't we book 17 sessions together? You would
Right.
become really suspicious with me to say, like, Chris, why are you saying we need 17 sessions? I just booked one. Is it because you want to make more money? And chances are the answer would be yes.
So
Okay.
I also have kind of cheated this a little bit and used a parallel of a surgeon, right? A surgeon who's been doing their job for X number of years, right? Maybe the surgery takes an hour and a half, right? You're not going, okay, that's X per minute. You know, you never do that because it's something that his experience is so incredibly valuable. And I think that you're alluding to some of that, and you allude to that even more in one of my favorite concepts called Think Like Gucci.
Mm.
So talk to us about you and Gucci and how you're besties and why that is so valuable and why we as fractional CMOs or people who are consultants need to think like Gucci.
Yes. I want to present a couple different ideas. So everybody just lean in, just bear with me here. There's this idea called symmetry of logic. We understand symmetry. It's both, it's the same on both sides. We get that idea, right? I think creative people especially suffer from this asymmetrical logic. When we go out into the world, what do? We know the price of everything we buy before we buy it. Very rarely do we say, well, I want that jacket. And then 2 months later, you figure out how much to charge me for the jacket. It just doesn't work. As a buyer of services and products, I need to know the price up front. Hold that thought. Okay. We also know that we will pay more for essentially the same thing, even though its utility value is exactly the same. So, for example, there's a handbag, and you can buy a handbag from Target. You can buy one from, I don't know, Neiman
Anthropology.
Marcus. Neiman Marcus. You can buy one from Neiman Marcus, and you can also go and buy one from Gucci. They all essentially do the same thing, right?
100%.
They hold stuff, whatever stuff is, a wallet, chapstick, sunblock, sunglasses, whatever it is, they hold the same thing. So their utility value is exactly the same. You could argue, and it's not always true, that the one that costs more will last longer, but it's a marginal return relative to the price, meaning it will not last 100 times longer, even though it costs 100 times more. So then we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we're actually buying then when we go into a Gucci store and buy a Gucci handbag? Well, we buy a sense of status, right? If you put
Totally.
on a nice handbag, if you have an expensive pair of sunglasses, or you drive a fancy car, you're quietly transmitting to the world, and more importantly to yourself, that I have worked hard enough to achieve success that I can spend money like this and it's not going to materially impact me in a negative way. And it smells like success, it looks like success, so therefore you must be successful. Not always true, obviously. Okay. So when you go into the Gucci store, do you try to bargain with Gucci? Do you try to ask them, well, you know what? Neiman Marcus's bag is 1/8 of the price, and the Target bag is 1/100th of the price. What can you do for me? They're going to look at you like, that's a door, and
Right.
please don't let it hit you on the way out. They
Right.
don't negotiate with you unless you're in some kind of bazaar or an open air market where
Totally.
questionable if those are Gucci bags to begin with. They set a price, and what they do is instead of lowering their price to meet a customer, they set the price and find a different customer who can afford and want that. And
Okay.
believe it or not, by
Bam.
setting the price higher, it creates a feeling within the consumer. If they were to set it lower, believe it or not, the desire to have such things becomes less because we like scarcity. Okay, we want to know that if we walk around with a certain bag or drive a certain car, that we're not going to pull up in a parking lot and every car is exactly like ours. It's part of our identity. So we buy things to form our own identity. And the question goes, when you buy something, what does it say about you? And we're all making conscious and subconscious decisions when we buy something. So how does this relate to you, the independent contractor, the independent business owner? Is ask yourself this question. Price tells a story. What story are you telling with the price that you are setting? Are you going to be the discount service provider? Or are you going to be the premium service provider? Are you world-class in your talent? And does your price reflect that? So if you're a world-class superstar creative person, architect, logo designer, videographer, if you're a superstar, but you're charging bargain basement prices, one of two things is true, not both.
Right. And would you agree that the customer that you have there is basically going to call your bluff and tell you what you are?
Well, there is an argument here. So let's just say, like I said, you set your price as a superstar. You either are or you're not, and you're going to find out really quickly.
Exactly.
So if you just graduate school and you're like, well, Chris told me to charge a lot of money. Well, can you back it up? Do you have the skills to prove it? Right. And conversely, if you're a superstar with all these skills and you don't charge so much, when the client pays you for that, they're going to tell themselves a different story. This person's easily replaceable. If it doesn't work out, I'll hire someone else. It's not a big decision for them to make because they didn't, the price wasn't so much. That's why.
Exactly. Okay. One more of these isms that I know is going to like one of your favorites. I'm assuming anchoring. Talk about anchoring, right? Because here we are, hey, Chris, I have this great idea. I'd love you to build me one of those animated shorts around this, around that. Up for another Emmy? Let's go.
Right.
So how much is it gonna? What's your fee? How do you charge? Right. So this now what?
Yeah. So everybody remember this word anchoring, and I'll give you a little analogy to help you. Imagine yourself as a tiny little boat floating at the sea, and you found a great fishing spot. This is where all the fish are. And what happens is with the tide, it moves you away from your spot. And so what do? You drop an anchor. You drop an anchor, and the anchor holds you within a certain radius, right? So you're going to move around a little bit, but you're not going to go 300 feet away unless the tides are very strong and your anchor is not heavy enough. And that's what anchors do. It's a form of cognitive bias, cognitive of the brain, right? The way that you think, cognition. And it's a bias that we have, that we tend to rely too much on the first piece of information that we get. Let's put this in principle, or let's take the principle into practice here. If you talk to someone and you're talking about designing a commercial, let's just scale it down so it's a lot more relatable to everybody. Okay. Let's just say it's a logo. I think everybody understands what a logo is, right? The client comes over to you and says, hey, we want a logo from you. We hear you're great. And we have a lot of money to spend on this. We have $1,000 to spend on a logo. And in your mind, you're like, wait a minute, that's not a lot of money. They just said $1,000. Now, adjust this number to wherever you are in the world. For some people, it will be a lot of money. But let's say in your mind, you're like, I was going to ask them for $6,000. They just told me that was a lot, and they're so happy to work with me, and they have $1,000. What's happening inside your mind now is you start to negotiate against yourself because the anchor is drawing you down. It is drawing you down. So you're sitting there thinking, I can't do it for 1,000, Mr. and Mrs. Client, but I can do it for like 3. They're going to be like, that's 3 times as much as we're willing to pay, Chris. And we get into negotiations. We might wind up with like $1,500 for the logo. And then we walk away with mixed emotions, Lauren. We're like, I got them up, but it's a lot lower than I would have asked. I wanted 7. Let's try this scenario out again. All right. Client comes to us. Hey, Chris, we love you. We think you do amazing logos. You're like, you know what? I'm so happy. I just want to let you know, just because I don't want to waste your time. For us to do a logo for you, it's going to be anywhere between $10,000 to like $7,000. I don't know enough about your business just yet, but I just want to let you know in case you have sticker shock. That same client was about to say 1,000 out of their mouth.
Right.
They hear $10,000 to $7,000. They're thinking, oh my God, this is embarrassing. I can't offer him 1,000. He's going to think I'm just some dirtbag coming in here trying to like just price, a bottom feeder. So, Chris, we can't do like 10 is like too much. Like, oh, okay. What can you do then? They're, maybe 6. Can you do it for 6?
Right. And even that sounds like there's so much trepidation. There's such a lack of confidence. Yes. And also a lack of value perception, right? Because you're basically dumbing it down yourself. and it doesn't give permission for somebody to be like, wow, this is an amazing, this is equitable, right? Like we're both like winning out.
Yeah.
So I really love the way that you've described it. And so I'm curious, because a lot of people that are watching here, like I do the job thing and work with a lot of big time creatives, and they're always asking the same question. Should I throw my number out first, or should I wait to find out what the hiring manager is saying? So how might you adapt that in those kinds of situations? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. The answer is unfortunately complicated. It depends. Now, if you know what you're doing, you know what the market price is, then you should say your price first. If you're clueless, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what the market rate is, then you should say your price last. Here's why. And I'll give you both examples so you can figure
This
this
is
out.
important.
Yeah, it is important. So I know what my market rate is. I know it's going to be high. I know clients are going to come in and they consistently try to lowball me and offer me less. I'm going to say the price up front. I have to, because otherwise I'm working with a very powerful anchor on their side, right? So if you know what you're doing. So for example, if you know the job pays $150,000 or whatever it is, you come in and you ask for 175. You just go and ask for more than what you think they can pay, because you know what it's worth. You know your value to market. Now, this has happened to me too. Like I've been working as a professional creative person for over 25 years. A client had asked me, Chris, can you design a virtual reality experience for us? I'm like, what do you mean? So this is something I know nothing about, right? They're like, well, we have a firm. They're going to do all the work. We just want your input. So we want you to work as a consultant. And I said, well, I have no idea how to charge you for this. This is not something I've done before. Now, the reason why I say that is because in their mind, they already know how much they're paying for the VR experience itself. They know what it's going to cost. And I don't know that number, and I don't need to, but they know that number. So when I put myself at the mercy of the client and say, I don't know how much to charge for this, they're going to say, what if we paid you $10,000? Okay. There's a good chance whatever they say is going to be higher than what I was going to say, because they're essentially paying me for my opinion. Like I'm not designing anything. I'm just, my opinion is all they're paying for. So I was like, okay, that sounds pretty good. So what I say to the client at that point, instead of saying the number I had in my mind, which was like $5,000, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll tell you what, that seems fair. If for whatever reason this winds up being much bigger in scope than that, and you need a lot of my input, then I'm going to come back and ask you for more money. Is that okay? Like, absolutely. Fair is fair, Chris. And that's how you would do something where you don't know what it's going to be, the budget. Now, I'll give you another example. These are all real examples, okay? There was a big company that wanted to pay me to help promote their product. Company I love, company I believe in. And we're going into the meeting. My producer and I were talking like, how much should we ask for? So they're looking for social media mentions, okay? Social media mentions. And we're like, do we ask for like 30 or 50K? I'm like, you know what, just don't say anything. Let's go. So we get into the conversation and we're chatting with this person who is representing the company. And they're like, okay, Chris, what's it going to cost? So there's that magic word again, cost. So cost takes me back to like, what does it cost me? I had to forget that. What they're thinking about is price or value. And so here's what I did. I said, you know what? To be honest, I haven't done this enough to tell you what it should be. I would hate to go back and forth with you and trying to figure this thing out. Why don't you just tell me what you have and we'll see if we can work with that. Now, remember, minutes before, my producer and I were talking 30 to 50K to do social media mentions, right? And the person pauses like, you know what, Chris, we don't want to play any games with you. We really just want to work with you. It's a 6-figure budget. Can you work within that? And they literally said at that point, $120,000. And I paused, pretending like I didn't fall out of my chair.
Yeah, right. I was like,
I'm like, okay. I said, you know what? I appreciate just how frank and direct you are. I think within reason, pretty much anything you ask me for, I can do for that kind of budget. Let's just make that work. Does that work for you? And this person's like, yep, it works for me. Let's go.
bam!
So two scenarios. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what the fair market value is. And then I just let them say the price. Imagine if I came in. Okay, Lauren, check this out. Like, yeah, I took some negotiation and pricing course. I heard online. I'm going to tell them what's up.
Negotiation, Rashad, woohoo!
Right? I'm just going to walk in there. Well, excuse me, client. Well, you know what I bring to the table. My fans are really engaged, and I'm thinking at minimum it's going to be 45K at minimum, right? And they're going to snicker. They're going to, Chris. So if we give you like 50, will you be okay? I'm like, yes. Negotiated my way into that one, right? Because I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Right. So herein lies, the way that these nuances go. There is no hard and fast. You've obviously like been able to put them in their own respective, camps. It works this way in these kinds of situations, and it works probably better in these kinds of situations. So this isn't like, don't think it's a one size fits all.
Yeah, it's
I want
not.
to ask you. I want to ask you this kind of last question because I really want to be respectful of your time, and we like had tech snafus,
Mhm.
and I could talk to you forever and ever, but we won't do that. The question that I have for you, and I mean, I get like kind of choked up about this because, one of the recent YouTubes that you were on talked about your definition of success as you're getting pretty close, number one. And number two, it's really having the freedom to be able to do what it is that you want to do when you want to do it. And also, when asked about what a mistake is, you made it very clear that your definition is a necessary part of learning. So I lost track about 20 years ago of all the mistakes I made. And as part of your illustration, you talked about, were they really mistakes? Because every mistake that I made brought me to where I am now. So they really were necessary. None of them were like, okay, flick them off. So what other pieces here with respect to mistakes is something that we have not covered yet, maybe about cost, price, or value, or a mistake that you are asking or want to put out there so that your mission can be achieved with loving your work?
This is a giant question, Lauren, by the way. There's a couple of ideas I want to just share with the audience here. I think from the time in which we are aware of our own thoughts, probably around 2 or 3 years old, whenever you learn to speak and use words, I think what we do is, and just part of our nature is to seek pleasure while trying to avoid pain. And it's our society, it's how we're socialized. It's like we want to get the A. If we don't have the answer, we don't raise our hand because we could be wrong. And so it's created a whole culture of people who are afraid to say something because they could be wrong. Because you know what? Kids can be cruel. I know this because I've witnessed this firsthand. They can snicker, they can laugh, they're like, oh, you idiot, you're such a dummy, and so we don't want to raise our hand. And so we learn to try a little bit less each and every single time. And there's an exception. There's a handful of people who just try over and over again because for whatever reason, they were either hardwired differently or when they went home, their parents asked them instead of like, how did you crush it? It's like, what good mistake did you make today? What did we learn from that? And so maybe there was some nurture and some nature involved in that. I don't know. But we've now created a whole culture that's afraid of trying something because we want to take the perfect path. If you want to date someone, you want to fall in love with the person of your dreams, we're afraid of asking someone out because there's a high probability they're going to say no. And so we don't ask anyone out. And so eventually we might meet someone and settle for whatever we have. That's no way to live your life. So I want to help reprogram and reframe this concept of mistakes. Mistakes are you going out of your comfort zone to try something new and different. So if you make no mistakes, I guess you could argue that you're not trying anything new or different. There's a bunch of people who say something like this: Denzel Washington, Steve Harvey. It's like, if you don't fail, then you're not really trying. They don't mean like you're not trying, like you haven't put in effort, but you're not trying to stretch yourself. And the quote goes something like this: like, Warren Buffett will not invest money into first-time entrepreneurs. He wants to know how you failed before, because in the failures, your character is built. Did you get up from that? What did you learn? How did you apply yourself moving forward? He doesn't want to pay for your first mistake because he knows As a first-time entrepreneur, you're going to make lots of them. And in our own lives, we've seen this before time and time again. When we see people that we know, that we care about, they try a new business venture, they fail. What do? They stop.
They stop.
They just quit right there. Right. So I think what we should do is we should create a new culture, change the language around what it means to fail and to make mistakes. To me, there's only one true failure, which is when you have a setback, a challenge, and you miss your target. The failure is if you don't actually learn anything from it and you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. We also know people like that. Sometimes those people look at us back in the mirror. We don't learn from the mistake. So for me, when you make a mistake, instead of just feeling bad about yourself, instead of beating yourself up, you should say, congratulations. What did we learn from this? How can we be better in the pursuit of what it is that we want from the lesson that was learned here? So in the obstacle, in the failure, is the lesson, a complete set of plans or instructions on how to succeed. That's it.
A complete set of plans. Your mistake bought you a blueprint, right? It is able to take that so that you can find other issues that may be wrong with the plumbing or, the way that the wall was constructed and use that going forward. Chris Do, I just thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for speaking to LinkedIn. Thank you for speaking out about this great kind of confusion on price value and cost. I think I mixed them up. And I'll be seeing you on YouTube. I'll be seeing you on certainly Instagram. I will make sure that I put those links in this chat afterwards. And seriously, you guys, oh, by the way, my favorite part, if I didn't tell you yet, the page numbers on this thing are on the side. Thank you so much. Genius little detail. I just love that. I do. And great title too. So thank you for everything. And thank you everybody for joining. Have an awesome rest of your day. And it was a blast. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Thank
Bye.
you, Lauren.